David M., you're up next.
Thanks for having me today.
No problem. You got a hand for us?
I do. This is another Parks hand, 2-5.
Oh, no. Okay. So Parks 2-5.
So in this hand, we're 800 effective, and I am the effective stack. So just to jump right into the hand, so there was a straddle on. There was not a permanent straddle in the game. It just happened to be that this hand was straddled. I'm in the cutoff, so it actually folds to me in the cutoff. So I raise to 35 with 7 of diamonds, 9 of diamonds.
So 9 of diamonds, 7 of diamonds. Okay. Mm-hmm.
The button folds, the small blind calls, and the big blind and the straddle call. So I'm sorry, fold. So we end up being heads up.
Okay. So you're just heads up.
Yep. So pot around $80.
All right. So $80. So so just a straddle from under the gun, but the game was not being straddled all the time, which is important. You go to 35 with 9, 7 of diamonds in the cutoff. Small blind calls and your heads up. Is the small blind the guy? Is he shorter than you? Like shorter stacked than you?
I'm actually the effective stack this hand.
The only thing I would say here is that normally when I was playing 5-10, I'd make it 35 to open here. And, we're playing 2-5-10, finally 35 is fine. I will say, like, especially in a 2-5 game, this is very subtle, right? In an occasional straddle, with you only being 800 deep, I probably would have made it smaller. I probably would have either made it 25 or 30 to give yourself a little more maneuverability. And again, the game's it's just only being played with this straddle like once in a great while. So sometimes people won't even they won't even notice it. You know what I'm saying? So like you can get, if you picture a scenario where people don't even necessarily notice the straddle or they don't adjust to the fact that now all of a sudden you're playing double the stakes, you could theoretically bring it in for the normal raise size that you were bringing it in without the straddle for like 20, and they're not really adjusting. It's not like they're adjusting in position to like, oh, now all of a sudden this is a min raise, like if we were playing a regular 2-5 hand and I made it 10. But that's just something subtle. I'm more concerned about the fact that you're only 800 deep. But okay, so small blind calls and your heads up. Okay.
Gotcha. Okay. So we go to a flop of ace of spades, 10 of clubs, 8 of spades.
Ace of spades, 10 of clubs, 8 of spades. So you've got this sort of bottom open-ended here with 9-7, right?
Correct.
Okay.
So the small blind checks as expected. I c-bet for 35. And I guess, do you have any thoughts on that sizing?
I would have bet larger. I usually on these boards, I bet larger on the 2. So going back to like the last call, I mean, on a 2 flush, 2 Broadway board, you're definitely allowed to bet larger. And you might even get into a situation where just like playing this one like five moves ahead, like this was chess in this configuration, without even knowing what's going to happen, I could even see this. I could even see myself triple barrel bluffing this entire run out here. The reason why I'm saying that specifically with our holding is because I'm talking about like if it misses, if it came, like if you bet and he called and then it came like deuce 3, I very well might triple barrel off. The reason why that is because I don't know. I mean, again, obviously the guy might not be necessarily be paying attention, but there really shouldn't be that many calls here out of the small blind. He really should be playing a 3-bet or fold type of scenario. Now, again, I know it's 2-5, but he's probably at best, if he goes call, check call, going to have ace jack like at best. If he 3-bets ace queen, I mean, you're raising from the cutoff. And that's like the top of his range. If he just plays it as a check call to the river. And what that assumes is if he would be raising at some point 2-pair or better. So if it's just like check call, the best hand a lot of times he's going to have is ace jack. That's why I say like I would, if I saw this flop and I had your hand, I would seriously think, I'm like, wow, like I might just triple through this hand. With that being said, I would still probably start with a larger bet size of like 50 or 60 here. But okay, so you go 35.
Okay, gotcha. And just a little bit of the player profile, but the I play pretty regularly at Parks. The small blind, I do not recognize him, so he's certainly not a regular at the 2-5. And he seemed to be a little more of a loose passive, at least pre-flop. So he was playing, I guess the typical live exploit, playing more hands than he should. So, and didn't seem to be 3-betting pre-flop, that he wasn't as aggressive pre-flop as other players. So he does not call, he actually check raises, and check raises to 100. So at that point, the thought of potentially folding slightly crossed my mind, but I certainly had a nutted draw. I thought he would do this with a lot of combo draws, so I admit I was concerned about a spade draw, and that would limit my cleanouts to the nuts to only 6. But I did elect to continue because I still felt it wasn't a super large check raise. So I went ahead and called the 100, and we went to the turn, so we had 280 in the pot.
So just a couple comments about this. One thing that I'm going to disagree with you on, you're thinking through the hand, fine, but one just based upon, me watching hands and playing hands for the last 20 years, I don't think he's going to end up with as many spade draws here as you think. So when somebody is taking a passive line against the preflop raiser on an ace-high board like this, you see far less semi-bluffs on this type of board as opposed to like if the board was like 7-5-3 with like 2 spades. You know what I'm saying? Or something like that. So even if he had like king jack of spades here, obviously there's some frequency, right, that he's going to be raising. But even from a theoretical perspective, you're probably not supposed to raise. It is just a single raise pot, but you're probably supposed to be doing a lot of calling anyways. King, queen of spades, king, jack of spades are gut shots. Queen, jack of spades is the one that's like the 15 out draw, or 7-9 of spades, or jack 9 of spades. Now, all those hands start to get raised off, especially if it's multi-way, because you want to clean up the other people's outs, like in a multi-way pot. But I don't know if there are as many spade draws as you think, because what I was going to say here is that I would continue on with your hand. I would be thinking differently. I would think that usually this is sort of leaned towards like a made hand. And if I wanted to continue on with this hand, I would consider bluffing spades if spades came in and he checked me. Now you have to understand, and you have to shape the pot, because he only started with 800, such that if a spade comes and you bet the turn, you want to leave enough so that if a clean run out comes, you can shove at the end, because sometimes people will they won't think ahead enough, and then they'll get into a situation where they don't have enough to bluff off at the end. But you do want to take that into consideration. Now, if he did have some sort of combo draw here, the other thing too is like if a spade comes and he just bets again, then you just fold. I'm talking about if he checks you.
Right.
The other thing that you want to just take into account too is just the quality of your straight draw. Like on the top end, a jack comes. So what would that bring in terms of the straight draw? It would bring in like king, queen. So king, queen of spades, and then queen 9 if he even V-pips that. So I'm not that concerned about the quality of your straight draw, just with what's out there. But I would continue with, sort of thinking about that. So 280 here to the turn, okay.
And I think to your point, Bart, it did run across my mind that if there was a spade and he checked, that my intention was to use that as a bluff. Because then I would figure, to your point, that, okay, now he's got a made hand, but he's afraid of the spades.
Mm-hmm.
The 10x of spades crossed my mind as well, that maybe he was doing it with that. I thought he could have a hand like a spade draw, 10x of spades, or he might have maybe even a slow played ace king or ace queen, just because I thought he might be the player that might not 3-bet that pre-flop, but then he'd get aggressive with it on the flop.
Well, that's what some people are saying. King, queen of spades obviously is the one that's a huge reverse implied odds. And I say, well, how often does that hand 3-bet out of this small blind? If you're saying that he's going to flat sometimes with ace king, then maybe he'll flat with, some king queen as well. Okay, so 280 to the turn.
So 280, and then the turn is the 10 of hearts.
Okay.
So he then checks. So I kind of weigh through my options there is do I want to start a bluff bet, or do I want to check back to just realize my equity? Ultimately, I decided on a check back.
So obviously you can be totally being like trapped, like sandbagged here by like, ace 10, right? Or pocket eights or 10-8 or something like that. Ace 10 is the one that kind of jumps out at me here, right? I don't think he's going to have aces because of call. So, I mean, you can be getting sandbagged here. The only thing I would say here, and I've actually, so I have two thoughts here. Number one, let's say that you check this back, and let's say on the river's a jack, okay? Like an offsuit jack. And he comes out and he bets like $300 bucks. What are you going to do?
So he bets like 300. Are you asking what would I do?
Yeah. You check the turn back, and the river's a jack, and he bets like 300. You make a straight, by the way.
I think I may just have to call in that situation.
Really?
Because you even just said he could be slow playing a full house, and if the river's a jack and then he bets big, he's betting over pot.
I mean, I might fold, to be honest with you. That's what I'm saying. Like, I don't know what you beat if the river's a jack and he comes out and he bets. I guess you beat like front door spades, but the thing about checking this back and then sometimes making your hand, like you could just be beaten here anyways. I do wonder if you could throw in a bet of like 150 here, maybe 150 to 175, and you might get a lot of folds here once the board pairs. Even guys with combo draws might fold. They might get scared. Now, with that being said, you do sort of lend yourself to getting a little bit trapped here in a certain situation. It's not the easiest spot, that's for sure. And a lot of guys will check full houses here. If you're going to check this back, sometimes you might want to root that you don't make it, I guess is the point. Hero checks behind. And for that reason, I might actually stab here some of the time a little bit in position on the turn, but you might run into a full house here some of the time as well. All right, so let's go to the river.
So the river is the 6 of clubs. So clearly one of the best possible cards in the deck for me.
Well, here we go. I mean, I said the jack, but here you got the 6 of clubs. Okay. Uh-huh.
The villain checks again.
Okay. All right. So here's the thing. So small blind checks. Now this is much, much different than the first call that we had with Michael G. Because what was part of the range that you thought you had gone over, Dave, like a range of hands that you thought this guy had when he check raised the flop, right? What was that range?
Well, certainly sets, and if it were sets, it would be 10s or 8s.
Okay, that's part of it.
He could have ace king or ace queen.
Mm-hmm.
He could have 10x of spades.
Right. I don't think 10x of spades is played this way as a check on the turn, but that was part of your flop range before you knew what would happen on the turn.
Right. Or he's got other combo draws, right. And if he's on a spade draw that missed, he's got nothing.
Right.
But his made hands, he could have like an ace queen or an ace jack here, or some type of ace that got frisky on the flop.
Yeah, and I was going to say, like, of that flop range that you just talked about, what is probably the most likely portion of that flop range that plays the rest of the hand in this manner, which is checks turn on a 10 and then checks river on a 6. Now, because I just took out part of that range when you said 10x of spades, which was one hand that he could have, but I don't think it checks turn. But what does? What hands might, besides the busted bluffs, what other hands might play it this way that you mentioned on the flop?
A weaker ace,
right.
Like the ace queen, ace jack, maybe ace
king?
4 suited, ace 8 that got counterfeit.
Yep. So once he plays it this way, you have to bet now. I would never dream of checking back. You want to try to get those.
The thought never crossed my mind not to bet.
Right.
So I bet 200 into the 280. So I guess I am curious as to what sizing you would take in that situation.
I think the way that this one played out, I think that's fine. I might even go, if you think that he has like an ace that's good enough to check raise. Here's the thing, like, I don't know in this guy's mind if ace jack, ace queen, or ace eight is really any different. Now, maybe like for some less thinking players, like they might do less calling with ace eight. But when I say less thinking, like they're just like, oh, I mean, they should be doing less calling with ace eight if like you're value betting like ace king, ace queen, or some other hand, but people aren't necessarily thinking through that. I might go larger here because I do think you're gonna get called by an ace. And I don't think that like ace four, ace five are really the ones that are check raised on the flop. I think it is more of like ace jack, ace queen, or ace eight, or ace king. And I do think, I think you might get called. I might bet up to like 250 here. I mean, those are the hands that I'm going to target. So I probably would go larger, to be honest with you.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
So villain actually jams. So he jams all in, and it was around like 465 for me to call.
So small blind jam. It's another, so what, 665 total?
Yeah.
So when you bet 200 and a 480, he goes 665 total. So it's like what, 1150, 455 for you to call? Is that right? 1150, 455 for you to call? Something like that?
Yeah, that sounds about right.
I mean, I don't see it. I can't imagine you'd ever be good here. I mean, I know you're going to be getting almost 3-1, but you talk about it like a textbook river. I mean, it is a little bit, it is what it is, like in the sense that, yeah, I mean, it's not the most common thing to get checked to twice with a boat when you check behind on the turn. And you wouldn't think that somebody with like ace 10 would want really to do that, like if you had an ace here. But at the same time, I do see it a lot because, again, you're going to have to come up with a bluff here. You know, you're going to have to come up with a bluff that somebody like check raises river. And it's not, you know, somebody might be like, whoa, what about 10x of spades? You know, and then the people who might play like towards the higher stakes that have never played live poker might think 10x of spades is some sort of bluff. And then somebody else might think that 10x of spades is somehow some sort of value, where both are neither. You're never really going to show, I don't think you're going to show up. I don't think that's going to get shown. All those things get bet from up front. So I can't really come up. I mean, and again, like it would have to be like some sort of busted out spade draw. So 1155 for, I think we said what, 460. Would you say 465 to call? Something like that?
465 to call.
So 1, 2, 3. Oh, so you got to be good here 1 out of 4 times. I don't like to fold when I start to get pot odds here, Dave. That's the only thing. I mean, I don't think this is necessarily a snap fold, but I do think you're beat here.
You think I'm beat the majority of the time in this situation?
Well, yeah, but you got to be beat here, 75% of the time here.
Well, right, or that's what I meant. More than what the odds would reflect.
I mean, listen, I've been in a spot like, I think it's probably closer than people think. I've been in spots like this where I'll flicked in the call. Some people are saying, what if he also had 9-7, like 9-7 of spades? And then other people saying, could he ever just have 10x of spades? I don't know if 10x of spades though. Yeah, it's so weird. You have to, because look at the whole line, guys, like of 10x of spades. Check raise flop, then check the turn when trips come in, and then check the river to go for a check raise. Do you see how unlikely I feel like that line is? You know? So what'd you end up doing?
I had not seen somebody take this line against me in forever, if ever, I felt like, to where it was the double check, I think, that really threw me off. So I went into the tank, maybe the longest I've ever been in the tank. Somebody actually ended up calling clock on me. And I just, it did cross my mind. He could have 9-7 as well. We could be chopping pot. He could, for some reason, be overvaluing a 10. I mean, my initial reaction was to fold. And then, good or bad, I stopped and thought about it for a while. And I guess I wanted to make sure I slept well at night. So I flipped in the call. And you called it. He had ace-10. So that seemed to be your initial reaction as to what he had. He had ace-10 offsuit.
Well, that's the thick slow play that makes a whole lot of sense. Because even like 8's full and even like 10-8, like those hands have some vulnerability. I'm talking about like when they of a hand that's value that check raises flop and then boats up on turn. They still have vulnerability across the turn, but ace-10 is like that. It's almost invulnerable, right? in his eyes. So that's why I would, or like if it was quad tens or something like that. I just want to read one other comment here. Some Scott Alford says, does caller ever have a boat here when he checks back the turn? If not, this is the best hand we have, then it's a call. I think call. Only one combo of ace 10 and lose to 8-8, I guess. Here's the thing about that, Scott, even though that's theoretically correct, and this is why you can make these pretty large exploits, and sometimes the approach to live poker when you're trying to, I would say, play for the most EV as opposed to always sort of playing fundamentally correct. Like, yeah, it's a gigantically exploitable. If the hero is never checking back a boat, right, as played on the turn. Now, I'm not saying that, but let's just say hero never checks back a boat. Then this is really the best hand that he will arrive with. So if it's the best hand that he will arrive with, and if the caller folds, then by definition, the caller is just playing unbelievably exploitable because his opponent is getting him to fold out everything. While that's true, that can still be the best approach in a lot of cases, because that whole approach to saying I have to call because it's the best hand that I get to with here assumes that your opponent is also at that level and thinking at that level, which is just not the case most of the time, especially at 2-5. So anyways, I appreciate the call. Thank you very much.